topic is Science Stories, Connecting to Nature Close to Home, and we will feature artists Luca Bean and Lucia Harrison, whose work offers us opportunities to consider how to develop a relationship with science and our natural world and to make an impact in our community. And we're also so lucky to have the opportunity to learn from colleagues of the Bloedel Reserve on Bainbridge Island about their innovative Bloedel Strolls program that serves as a model for connecting with nature and our environment. As we start this program that revolves around our environment and our relationship to a land, it is appropriate to say on behalf of both Collins Library and the Puget Sound book artists that we acknowledge the Puyallup tribe, we acknowledge that we are on traditional homelands of the tribe, and that the Puyallup people have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We recognize that this land acknowledgement is one small step towards true allyship, and we commit to uplifting the voices, experiences, and histories of Indigenous people of this land and beyond. And I'd also like to acknowledge Lucia Harrison. Not only is she managing our Zoom session this evening, but she is also one of the co-curators of Science Stories and is responsible for the wonderful website that I hope many of you have visited. If you haven't, it's very easy. Just Google Puget Sound Science Stories and you'll be taken to a wonderful website with links to many videos and resources. Science Stories has brought together a unique group of artists and scientists to interpret science and our environment. For many of us, the last 18 months have heightened our awareness of our community and the environment around us. In fact, for many of us, I'm sure, walks and outdoor activities were an important way to manage our own personal well-being during the pandemic. I had the pleasure to meet our first two speakers this past year, as I was fortunate to participate in the Strolls for Wellbeing program sponsored by the Bloedel Reserve on Bainbridge Island. This reserve is 150 acres of forest landscapes and gardens, including natural woodlands, a Japanese garden, a moss garden, a reflection pool, and the Bloedel's former residence. The Strolls program, as detailed in this wonderful guide that you received, encourages individuals to use the environment as a place for reflection and peaceful thinking. We're so lucky to have Karen Hust with us, a nature connection mentor, working with individuals and groups to bring more depth, meaning, and enchantment to life. Her background and training is in literature, art, outdoor education, and interfaith spiritual direction. Karen Gerstenberger, hi Karen, is an artist, writer, certified forest therapy guide, and group facilitator with a passion for nature immersion. Tonight, they will introduce us to the Strolls program that is designed to offer a reflective journey to guide one on a path to truly connect to nature in all of its richness. So please join me in a virtual welcome for Karen and Karen.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jane. That was a lovely introduction. And I'm just so happy to see everyone here. This is just lovely. Thank you for being here. And I can't wait to see the presentations of the books as well. Right now, I'm going to share a little bit about the Bloedel Reserve that Jane so well described. Those of you from nearby may know of or even have visited the reserve. 150 acres, it's really big. It's a public garden that you can visit at this point by reservation because of COVID, but it is open to the public. It's a wonderful spot. But anticipating our fabulous book arts presentations, you may be wondering how Bloedel fits into this panel. It's not a handmade book, but it is a piece of art. It's a 4-dimensional nature book. It's ravishingly beautiful and intentionally planned with the help of science to nourish the connection between people and nature for the healing of both. The two of us will share a little with you about the Reserve and the Strolls program, which we co-facilitate. And we had Jane in our class, which was just wonderful. We hope to have the rest of you one day. First, I'm going to lead you on a journey down some paths at the Reserve to show you how they were artfully designed to maximize positive effects on visitors. And then how we have tried to expand that healing potential through the Strolls program. Bloedel Reserve offers an immersive experience that was from day one intended as a therapeutic landscape. These are the people who created it, our founders, Prentice and Virginia Bloedel. After they bought the property as a second home in 1951, they began a decades-long project of sculpting its ponds, fields, and woods into a series of native Pacific Northwest experiences, like runes, which intensified the natural peace and harmony of the native landscape. Virginia once wrote, "Being present in nature elevates and nurtures the human spirit, heals hearts and minds, and enriches our communities and our world." Oops. Not so fast. In the 1970s, Mr. Bloedel worked with leading pioneers like Charles Lewis, the father of horticultural therapy, the cultural geographer J. Appleton, who proposed the theory of prospect and refuge, and environmental psychologists Rachel and Stephen Kaplan. There was a lot of thought put into how people would think, perceive, and feel in each garden space, and also in the transitions between them. Let me show you what I mean. This 5-acre meadow on the left is at the beginning of the trail leading from the gatehouse at the Reserve. And it was designed to be the very first experience visitors would have of moving through the landscape and into the garden. It takes at least a few minutes to cross it, with very little in the way of distraction, just soft, beautiful trees to enjoy at a distance. You can see the trail gently sloping down ahead of you as you go. You know you're safe and that it will be a while before you reach something new. It's a great subliminal invitation to slow down, to take a deep breath, and to let your cares drop away. Then after the open meadow, you enter this dense forest path on the right with its very different mood. All around you, suddenly interesting sights and sounds, and you are caught in the sensations of the present moment. The open meadow crossing has been a sort of palate cleanser, allowing you to let go of the past, preparing you to fully enjoy the complexity of the forest. And here's an example of an intentional transition that moves in the opposite direction. These pictures show on the left the moss garden, where you walk under a tree canopy, all surrounded by lacy shrubbery and carpeted in this soft, cushy layer of vivid green. From there, you pass through a mysterious opening in that huge hedge you see on the right, and suddenly you emerge at this reflection pool, which is a stark contrast in every way. Even just looking at these pictures, you may feel different sensations, thoughts, and emotions rising up. You've been wrapped in a very complex but soft environment, and suddenly you have a long, expansive view of a very simple, clean-lined shape framed in clear, regular lines of hedge. How does that expansive opening affect your body, your thoughts, your feelings? Both these spaces feel good to be in, but the dramatic change strengthens the silence and awe that the reflection pool can inspire. These are a couple of examples of the kinds of experiences the Bloedels designed into their garden. To deepen these positive effects and give visitors more support, the reserve founded the Strolls program. Karen G., I'm going to pass it over to you to tell us some more about how that happened.
Thank you. So, oh, this is great. Here you see the cover of our guidebook, which has just been redesigned. Thanks for showing that, Karen. So the Strolls for Wellbeing program was created because it wasn't very well known that the Bloedel Reserve was designed as therapeutic landscape. We wanted to make it easier to impact people's lives in a meaningful way, allowing them to experience the benefit of being in the garden and put a structure behind it so that they could have a practice that they could continue after they completed the program and take it with them wherever they go. We began with a pilot program in 2014, which is inspired by the Strolls for Wellbeing program founded at the Murakami Museum and Japanese Garden in Delray Beach, Florida. That was created by Ruth McCaffrey, who is a professor of nursing at Florida Atlantic University. That garden, the Murakami, is a 4-acre loop. So there was quite an adaptation that needed to happen to bring it to our 150-acre property. And Karen's going to show us the map that we use in our guidebook. So you can see on the left there, the Bloedel Reserve is sort of broken into, but it isn't, it's all unified. But for the purposes of the stroll program, we've highlighted these 4 different areas of the garden in different colors, and we take 3 walks in each of those 4 areas to make our 4 strolls. And if you have any specific questions about how this program works, we can answer those at the end. So on the right, you can see the beautiful and serene interior of the Japanese guest house on the property. And that is in that green area, the darker green in the middle of the map. So some key elements of the program are the fact that it is free and open to the public. It includes 3 facilitated meetings, which are usually held in that beautiful, serene Japanese guest house. But because of COVID, we have moved it online, and we do them via Zoom, just like we're doing now. Another element of the program is that participants receive a copy of that beautiful journal, and it contains 12 different themes to explore, such as awareness, possibility, reflection, and 9 more. So these strolls take place in these 4 specific areas, and then you're always welcome to venture out along the other trails as well. We offer a strolls program designed specifically for people who are experiencing grief. This was an offshoot of the original program. And we launched a pilot program with Virginia Mason Medical Center in 2019. The goal of that program is to collect quantifiable data about the effects of our Strolls for Wellbeing program. Even though it was a fairly small group of 14, the outcomes showed positive effects on blood pressure, pulse rate, and a sense of overall wellness. And I should mention too that Ruth McCaffrey, who founded the program in Florida, was doing her own body of research as a nursing professor, comparing the questionnaires she gave people at the beginning of the program with questionnaires taken at the end. They were blind, but it was just to see the trajectory of a sense of well-being. So now you see a participant writing in her beautiful journal in the Bloedel Reserve. And there's been an increasing amount of research and focus around the world regarding how green spaces positively influence well-being. And I'm guessing that everyone in this group knows that. Just a couple of examples, the Chicago Botanical Garden has an entire program of study in horticultural therapy. And another example is the Association of Nature and Forest Therapy Guides and Programs. They're certifying guides to lead people on nature connection walks all over the world. And that's who I received my training from. COVID has changed the way we do things at the reserve, and it's brought new opportunities for innovation. Before the pandemic, our well-being programs were running at capacity, and the situation created by this virus encouraged us to think more about how we can offer the strolls in a meaningful way through virtual methods. More space is now available in these sessions because Zoom capacity is larger than the physical space of the Japanese guest house. And Zoom meetings also help us to overcome the hurdle of our rather remote island location. Now we have participants joining us from different parts of the country rather than just the Puget Sound area. At this point, we're not sure how the program will be offered post-COVID, and we may offer a combination of Zoom sessions and on-site sessions, but that is to be determined. So Karen's showing you now an example of something that we created during the start of the lockdown when the reserve was actually closed to the public. We took the handbook and adapted into something we call the Strolls at Home. Those are 12 different walks, and you can see this one's week 2, so each one has a different theme. And our website data has showed that this was a favorite item for people who receive our weekly newsletter. We share these as free downloads in our Zoom meeting, stroll meetings, and we also offer them all the time on our website to anyone who has an internet connection. So they're available for people all over the world. All of these pages are formatted as printable PDFs, and each one features one of the 12 themes of the Strolls handbook. Then sort of a prompt or an invitation, a little background at the top, a prompt or an invitation, and then 3 things that you can practice on your own. And they can be practiced anywhere. So some other ideas we have for expanding our well-being programs are regular guided forest therapy walks at the reserve, supported group meetings around particular challenges in addition to the grief group, workshops on art or ritual in the out of doors. And then we also hope to create 3D videos of virtual walks for people who can't visit in person. And that way they could experience the reserve from home, maybe even from the hospital or from faraway places. When we're able to hire more staff, which is hopefully soon, we can do more to directly encourage others to create programs like this, tailored to their unique sites and unique needs. Meanwhile, in the hope of inspiring you, here is an example of what participants have told us they've gained from or they feel about the Strolls for Wellbeing program.
Thank
So we
you.
just, I was just going to say thank you for inviting us. And if there's time later, we'll be happy to answer questions.
Karen and Karen, thank you so much. Seeing those images, I feel so privileged to be able to visit Bloedel on a regular basis. And the Strolls program is truly inspirational. And for those of you that haven't visited Bainbridge Island and live in Tacoma, I can tell you it's 1 hour and 10 minutes, and it's a lovely drive. And I'd be happy to meet any of you there if you visit. When I was reviewing my own book, I thought of one of the quotes from the Bloedel Strolls guidebook by Albert Einstein, by the way, would be a nice segue to conclude your talk and segue into introducing Lou Cabine. That quote says, "Look deep into nature, and then you will understand everything better." So Lou, we're so delighted that you can join us tonight. For those of you that don't know Lou Cabine, she is a Seattle-based artist who works with a range of media, including maps, textiles, stitching, and collage. For the past several years, the themes of her work have centered on climate change, and her recent work seeks to understand and undo our self-destructive alienation from the natural world. Lou's contribution to Science Stories is the book Making of a Meadow, which I am very pleased to say is now in the Collins Library collection. So any students watching, you will have access to that. This focuses on the Union Bay natural area in Seattle where Lou walks almost every day. And in talking about her book, she says, this ordinary field becomes extraordinary when its history is understood. My meetings in late summer with wetland ecologist Karen Crandall introduced me to the practices that brought about this transformation and deepened my ability to bear witness to the labor of tending that such transformation requires. The communities of more than human life that flourish here are now signposts of the possible. Welcome, Lou.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Jane, for that wonderful introduction. And thanks, Karen and Karen, for a wonderful view into the Bloedel, which I'm sure many of us miss if we have had the chance to visit pre-pandemic. And thanks for that synopsis, Jane, of my piece in the Science Stories. It's not only a privilege to be here tonight talking with you guys, but it is also a real honor to be part of the Science Stories. And I'm happy to say that at least I saw in the first gallery views as we gathered that Karen Crandall, Dr. Karen Crandall, the wetland ecologist who was kind enough to consult with me on my Science Stories project, is with us today. So as questions arise, I'm sure she can join in as well at the end. Today, I'm going to talk about 3 projects, though, actually, that all reflect my desire to connect more deeply with the natural world in my daily life. And my daily life is lived in an urban setting and in a body that is mobility challenged. And so a lot of the assumptions that we have, or at least we boomers have, about what it means to live close to nature and to develop a connection to nature are really not available to me. My life is described and circumscribed by asphalt. I do not live close, or I don't even live in a climate that resembles remotely the landscapes of my ancestors. And as I said, I am mobility challenged. There's no Ansel Adams experience that is going to await me ever, right? So these projects that I'm going to talk to you guys about a little bit today reflect the natural world that is literally underfoot in my neighborhood. And those 3 projects are my Science Stories project that Jane so kindly and thoroughly introduced, the Making of a Meadow, my herbarium of useful plants, which actually had its origin during my creative residency at the Bloedel in 2018. And then very briefly, I will mention the quarantine herbarium that I was the online quarantine herbarium that I was able to participate in, that was compiled by Professor Elaine Ayer of NYU. So now I get to do my new technical experience right here in front of everybody, and I'm going to share my screen and bring up my slides so that we can see pictures. Great, great. So as Jane so kindly introduced to everyone, my contribution to the Science Stories project is called The Making of a Meadow, which basically describes my process of getting to know the Union Bay natural area, which is part of the University of Washington Botanic Gardens in Seattle, Washington. And as I said, the scientist I consulted with on this project was wetland ecologist, Dr. Karen Crandall. And I hasten to say that because of the pandemic, our ability to connect and find each other was greatly delayed. So deadlines are deadlines, and I embarked upon my project, and all mistakes that anyone can find in this are mine alone. And Karen was very kind to offer me that expanded sense of context that Jane reported on. So today, in the interest of time, on the website, there's all, you can hear from me, you can hear from Karen, you can see all kinds of videos. Today, for our purposes, I'm just going to concentrate on the how I manifested this piece. So as an example, a living example of connecting with nature. So connecting with nature, first and foremost, requires showing up, right? Which is where the close to home part of our title really comes into play. The Union Bay Natural Area is basically a 10-minute drive from my house here in Northeast Seattle, which means I can get there. When you open up the box, which was made by Jules Remedios Fay, I hasten to add, when you open the box, you find the top of the box contains 3 folders of herbarium sheets. And then there is a drawer that you can pull out of the box that contains smaller books. So first, when you take all these together, they illustrate my process of connecting with the nature I found on this site. An herbarium sheet, as you can see there, the Union Bay Natural Area, which is known as UBNA, which I may just say, I don't mean to be speaking in code, but that's the shorthand for this location, UBNA. The top, oh, here's my little pointer. So here we have the folders of herbarium sheets. And what is an herbarium sheet? Many of you may be asking. An herbarium sheet is a very sturdy piece of cardboard. Paper makers and book artists, you will love this material if you don't know it already, upon which dried botanical specimens are attached. And then traditionally, a very, very scientific, very clear, very precise label with all kinds of data are located. My herbarium sheets have indeed a dried botanical specimen, often but not always a drawing made from the plant at a different stage of life. And my rather idiosyncratic, I'm a lay person, I'm just a person who likes to draw plants. My rather idiosyncratic labels with the name and the Latin name of the plant form and where you can find it in the natural area, in UBNA. Now, in that drawer that you get to open, you have a number of smaller books. Oh, and I should say there are 20 herbarium sheets in total. In the box, the shrubs section is the largest, but there's also a folder of the primary invasives that are found on the site, plus the what keeps them under control. And then there's also a folder of herbarium sheets of wildflowers. In the drawer, we find smaller books, which can be unfurled, and you see a map. This is the basic map. I modified the map that was provided to me by the Washington State Department of Transportation. And this is a map of their compensatory mitigation that they did at UBNA in 2012. And it was a huge boon to me as I, as a layperson, could look up the native plants that were installed in the location and then find where those native plants were. So my connecting to nature as this layperson left on her own was to go with my map and look at a bunch of bushes and say, okay, one of you is a Nootka rose, one of you is a snowberry, and one of you is a 9-bark. And then I would get out Mr. Google and work that way. So I love maps. I also really deepened my appreciation with all this new material that I was gathering in the plant forms that I recognized, like the apple trees that are present on site. And so the Making of the Meadow book also includes this accordion book of my drawings of some of the apples that are present on the site. And there's also a small book of haiku. So we have all of these different ways. And these are skills that I had. I love maps. I like to draw. I do think in terms of text and counting syllables to start to understand this site. And last but not least, the historical context of a landscape can really deepen our sense of connection to it, especially a landscape we think we might know, right? So I also used, due to the pandemic, I was fortunately able to access all kinds of digital resources to understand the history of Bloedel, the history of the Union Bay Natural Area. And so there's a timeline on this accordion book that is a timeline, is also part of the project. And the timeline is a visual timeline, as you can see here. And on the reverse side of this accordion, the same timeline is described in text. One of the core aspects of the mystery and the compulsion I feel to really deeply, ever more deeply understand this site is that it originally was underwater. The Union Bay Natural Area was the lake bed of Lake Washington, which was exposed when the ship canal lowered the water levels. And then this location became a landfill. It was the city of Seattle's largest landfill for 40 years. Methane spontaneously would arise and had to be burned off. It was then capped with rubble and left to those invasives, which are still with us. And then the University of Washington stepped in with a number of professors and valiant graduate students and began to transform the space into the classroom and outdoor lab for the restoration ecology programs of the university. The next piece I'll talk about is my herbarium of useful plants. And here we see another wonderful box built by Jules Remedios Fay. The herbarium of useful plants contains 15 full-size herbarium sheets that document useful plants that I could find in a 5-block radius of my house here in Northeast Seattle. And it had its origin in the development of the workshop that was offered as a community offering during my creative residency at the Bloedel in 2018. And I shared that residency with artist and garden designer Sarah Jones. And she and I developed a workshop that would seek to sort of expand the audience for the herbarium sheet, as a way of preserving and understanding and recording our experiences in the natural world. And Sarah took the direction of sort of standard visual art collage materials, and I took the route of really unpacking that scientific and demystifying that labeling process. And so I started to make samples for the workshop and got completely hooked. So these are 2 of the samples I made for the workshop, which are in the piece. This is blackberry. And you can see far from, I've got the basic data coming along here along the side, but I have labeled this basically with storytelling. Recipes, my great-grandmother's recipe for blackberry pie. Where does it come from? Another recipe, a more contemporary recipe. And then, blackberry is also a plant that is extraordinarily divisive in my neighborhood. And so I do tell stories of the most violent of the conflicts that erupted in my alley over Blackberry. Here are a few more examples. Dandelion, a very useful plant, quite maligned by some of my neighbors, but a very useful plant. And I draw material from lots of different sources, then I have no problem in giving both the instructions for making dandelion tea, which is sort of excruciating, as well as my own personal method of making dandelion tea. Not just great grandma's recipes are included in this herbarium of useful plants. Here we have nettle, and Greg Atkinson of Bainbridge Island fame. Greg Atkinson peering at us here over his recipe from his first book of recipes for nettle soup, which was the first nettle soup I ever ate. Oregon grape, another highly useful plant, and I include this because there are drawings of my own also included in the herbarium of useful plants. This was just currently on display at Bainbridge Arts and Crafts, also in their essentials show this fall. And last but not least, the quarantine herbarium. The online quarantine herbarium was compiled by Elaine Iyer of NYU, who put out a call of encouragement to folks to literally on their pandemic walks to find a botanical that interested them, bring it home, dry it very simply in a heavy book, and then glue it into their journal, label it in however way they could, and send her a picture. And then she has compiled all of those photographs on a Google Docs quarantine herbarium. And I believe the link should be to see those should be in the chat. And this is one of my contributions to that. You can see that it said last wetland walk. When they closed down the parks for a while here in Seattle, because of my mobility issues, I was not able to walk from where I could park to get into the wetlands. And so Professor Iyer's project really gave me hope as a way to focus myself as I walked the relatively uninteresting, I thought relatively uninteresting streets of my neighborhood. And of course, I learned my own lesson that connecting with nature includes weeds, exotics, ornamental plantings, and basically showing up. So thank you.
Lou, thank you so much. When you were talking, I was going back, reflecting on your statement that you said the ordinary field becomes extraordinary when history is understood.
Yes.
And I would just say that the work that you've produced and your own interpretation is extraordinary. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Our final speaker tonight is Lucia Harrison, and for many of you, Lucia needs no introduction. But for those of you that don't know Lucia, she's a visual artist and faculty emeriti from the Evergreen State College, where she taught art and science interdisciplinary programs. She believes that combining visual art, science, and environmental education is a way to win hearts and minds for conservation. Her artwork draws attention to the natural and human history of South Puget Sound, and most recently, she is focused on the connection between native plants and animals. She makes paper and botanical contact prints, draws with ink and watercolor, and incorporates stitching into many of her projects. Her book, The Pacific Northwest Native Plant Website and Magic Books, uses art to highlight the relationships between native plants and animals. Lucia has created an incredible website with downloadable, open access, freely available material for educational, non-commercial purposes, as well as provides viewers with connections to view native plants and animals, resources for keeping a nature journal, for conducting citizen science, and advice on how to design a native plant garden for backyards, schools, or neighborhoods. Lucia, you're an inspiration to us all, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much, Jane, for that kind introduction. I had the great fortune to work with Jane, Carlin, and Peter Wimberger to co-curate the Science Stories exhibit. And it's really been a wonderful experience, both for us and for all of the participants. I taught for many years in interdisciplinary programs, art science programs at the Evergreen State College. And the Science Stories exhibit really is a kind of an example of some of the projects that we did with our students. So it's kind of modeled after Evergreen's interdisciplinary approach. I really think that good science can tell us about critical factors that are important to us in the environment, like climate change or ocean acidification or habitat loss. But I think that artists have a special role. And as Jane said, an artist can draw people in, they can communicate the science in a different way and win the hearts and minds of the viewer for conservation, and hopefully then influence public policy and personal choices. I have a number of concerns. One is the loss of native plant habitat in our area due to development. Right now in Hawks Prairie in Lacey, Washington, they've just destroyed thousands of acres of forest land to provide housing for Amazon warehouses, Uline, that's the packaging for the shipping, Target, and Home Depot. And then there are new housing developments going in and storage units for all of the stuff we're buying and don't have room for in our houses. I'm concerned about the lack of appreciation most people have towards the cultural and ecological importance of native plants. I'm concerned about the lack of knowledge of newcomers to the Northwest. It's not their fault. They come here, they don't really know where they are. They don't understand the history of the area. They don't understand the importance of native plants. And I've watched my neighbors have a beautiful forested part of their property simply remove the understory and plant grass instead, and then run over the grass with their power mowers, thus compressing the clay soil and suffocating the tree roots. So then the trees fall. Or I've watched people go into, a mega hardware store and say, well, what should I plant in my new garden? And they just buy whatever, universal plant is available during that season. So I'm really concerned about educating people about the importance of native plants. My Science Stories project, rather than taking that negative approach, takes a positive approach. And I'm going to share my screen right now to, let's see. So the project is called the Pacific Northwest Native Plant Magic Book website and Magic Book project. And it's really a hook of using art to help people learn more about the connection between native plants and animals through the seasons. Right now, the project includes books about 3 different native plants and 20 native birds, mammals, and insects. So the site, the website is accessible to the public and includes these downloadable sheets that you can print out and make the magic books. And here's an example of the red flowering currant magic book. And the pages in the book follow the plants and how they change during the various seasons. That's the thing I love to do when I'm walking to the same places over and over again, is to just discover how the plants are changing over time. There's a hidden pocket in each book, which is the magic book feature, that holds information about the focal plant and the animals that depend upon it. There are downloadable and printable black and white versions of each of the magic books. And these invite the viewer to learn more about the features of each plant and animal by hand coloring the book using the website as a resource. So on the website, there is a plant image library. And for each plant in the project, the website features drawings of that plant and photographs of that plant during different seasons. So you can see here, these are some of the photographs from the red flowering currant page, showing the budding and the flowering and how these flowers magically turn into currants and feed lots of animals, and hummingbirds love the flowers in the early spring. It's one of the first plants to flower. And then if you click on the website, there's a you can look at the Lachute seed name, the scientific name, and the common name. And if you clicked on the Lachute seed name, you'll get to the Tulalip Lachute seed website, and you can hear the pronunciation of the, see if I can move this over. Can I get rid of that? There, maybe you can see that better. You can see you can hear the pronunciation of the Lachute seed word, but you can also find stories about about that plant or what it's known for. So for example, if you clicked on Salal, you would learn that that August is known as the salalberry season, so that the plant, there's all of this knowledge about our native plants from an indigenous perspective that teaches us so much about this landscape. And so I like to highlight this important work. Let's see. I wanted to say that in this region, there are many dialects of Lachute seed. And on the website, I've linked to the northern dialect because the Tulalip tribe has a really great encyclopedia. But locally, the Puyallup, the Nisqually, and the Squaxin tribes speak a different dialect called Twiluchid. And the Puyallup tribal language program is dedicated to really increasing the number of native plant speakers by incorporating the language into daily life rather than teaching us European-oriented people how to say the names of things. Okay, let's see. Oh, here we go. Then when you're hand coloring the book and you want to figure out, well, how do I hand color this particular butterfly? You can go to the animal image library and again learn the Lachute seed name for the butterfly, and then see photographs and my drawings of each animal. The animal image library also links you to websites like the Cornell Lab All About Birds website, which has images of birds flying, mating, nesting, calling. It's just a wealth of information. So through this website, you can get to other websites. And if you clicked on the Lachute seed website pronunciation, say for the animal deer, you would hear Natasha Gobin read a story called Loon and Deer Were Traveling, which is by Vi Hilbert. And the stories would tell you some important cultural lessons that are really important to the history of our area. So there's a color version that you can also download. So there are sheets that look like this. And basically you just cut out the gray areas and fold it up. And then these are folded into cards, which are inserted into slots. So it's very easy these books are very easy to put together. Also on the website, there is my polemic about why native plants are important for ecological reasons, for practical reasons, for cultural reasons, educational reasons, and healthful reasons, like as the Bloedel example has shown us, for creating native plant habitats. There's also a native plant animal resource section, which follows my journey towards learning about native plants for the last maybe 20 years. So I really enjoy watching native plants and animals interact. I love the migrating birds that come and go and the flowers that come and go in different seasons. It just gives me a lot of joy, a sense of well-being, a connection to the heavens and the universe. It's just wonderful. And so on my, the native plant resource page, I can get rid of this. Maybe if I do this, there we go. It's a long page that has various resources. So first, learning to name and recognizing native plants and animals, I suggest that you visit parks and native plant demonstration gardens like the Native Plant Garden at Point Defiance Park. So get out in the habitat and look at the plants. Next part is, I think it's important to keep a nature journal of some kind, whether they're drawings or photographs, or as Lou has just done so beautifully, making your own herbarium, whatever it is. And I've given you some resources on how to go about learning to keep a nature journal. Once you've seen a plant and you think you've identified it, it's nice to go to find out what the good sources are for learning about birds or plants. And so the site has some really good recommendations for classic field guides and websites to help you learn more. If you want to learn more about Lachute seed, the site directs you to a Lachute seed dictionary, the encyclopedia I talked about, and this wonderful book by T.T. Waterman that's been translated by Vi Hilbert and Zalmai Zahir, who's a really wonderful linguist and Lachute seed speaker. And it basically has maps of the Puget Sound area and the indigenous place names, which can tell you a lot about where we live. I'm always wanting to encourage people to create backyard native plant gardens, school native plant gardens, neighborhood habitats. And so I've included links to resources to help you do that. And then there's lots of organizations that are committed to conserving native plant habitats for wildlife. Metro Parks has great volunteer opportunities, the Washington Native Plant Society, and there's also local watershed education programs like the Nisqually River Education Project. And so there's ways that people can get involved. So I've included links for how people can get involved, and then how people can become citizen scientists. Scientists can't be everywhere. It's too expensive. And so like the Nisqually Stream Stewards Program and the Education Project, they have kids up and down the Nisqually River collecting data on water quality and sharing it in a big a convention once a year. You know, so it's a way of having way more data than you could afford to do. And the Cornell Lab of Ornithology also has a backyard birds program for citizen science. So I hope the project will help people find ways to feel more connected to nature, and that they'll use this artistic hook to get involved, because I think it's so critical to preserve these habitats for future generations. There's the link, the website that you can go to see this project, and I'll put it in the chat. And I'd also like to thank the City of Tacoma Arts Commission, from which I received a grant, Evergreen State College that hosts the website, University of Puget Sound, and lots of individuals who've helped me with this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lucia. And in the chat, one of our participants, Fran McReynolds, has just said that she is in awe of your research and work. And I think I can speak for everyone that's been listening to you that that's just an incredible resource.
Thank you.
And I want to thank both Karen's, your insights on Bloedel, paired with Lou and Lucia's presentations, have inspired all of us, I'm sure, to think about how we can connect with nature in so many new ways. So virtual, thank you so much. I also want to take a minute to also recognize Peter Wimberger, who was our third curator of the Science Stories. And Peter is the director of the Slater Museum of Natural History at the University of Puget Sound. And we're so fortunate to have had his collaboration and his insights. And also many of the artifacts in our exhibit are from the Slater Museum. So Peter, thank you. And I understand some students are viewing the presentation as well. So we have just a few minutes for a couple of questions. We are at our appointed 1 hour, but if there are questions or comments that anybody would like to put in the chat, or if you feel comfortable, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question. I think there's just so much to think about. It's just really been an inspiring hour and so many opportunities. For those of you from the University of Puget Sound community, I told Karen and Karen that I have a dream that we could create a very mini strolls program on our beautiful campus. So we continue to have discussions with colleagues here at the University of Puget Sound on that. And if anyone is interested in working with me on that project, please contact me. Karen, Lou, Lucia, any parting words for us as we conclude this evening's presentation?
Just thank you so much. It was really enriching to be here and see these presentations. Even visiting the website, it made a huge difference to hear it in the artist's words, and what a privilege. Thank you.
And to Karen and Karen, I hope that we can arrange a visit for you in Tacoma. It would be great to have you come down. Lou, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be part of this. And I see in the chat that there is a reminder. I have been invited to teach a workshop on botanical journals and from altered books coming up next year. So I'll just help put in that little pitch for the guild.
Thank you, Lou. Well, I just want to again thank our colleagues from the Bloedel Reserve, thank Lou, thank Lucia, and all of you for attending. It was a fantastic and inspiring presentation and evening. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.